What up, dogs? Welcome to another unrelenting podcast type doohickey episode. Myself and Kenmi Wildman here will be discussing some upcoming releases. Another one from Games Workshop. This time we're going to be talking about Underworlds, in particular their Embergard release. Hello, Kenmi Wildman. How are you?
I'm alright, thank you, Cam. Having a spiffing day.
Good. Fucking wonderful, I suppose. So what's new, Kenmi? What's been on your painting desk as of late?
Not a lot. I've just come back from holiday because I'm fortunate.
Bougie bastard.
That's me. I am the petit bourgeois. I'm still working on some Votan bits. I'm actually trying to convert up a Votan vehicle for my squats in Necromunda, which should be very, very cool if we can get the 3D printed legs to work one day.
Fuck off, mate.
Other than that, I have just been going bone deep on the Ossiarch some more. Just very excited to get some more of those done. I want another Gothsar Harvester, this time with the crocodile face and the big slicey hands, because I want them to be distinct and unique.
Sounds done.
What about you?
Me? Shit. What have I been doing?
White Scars?
White Scars. White Scars are done and out. They look great. They are now with the client down south. Phase 2 of those is on their way with some Golden Keshig, Speeders, and the Khan, which would be great.
Some Blood Angels?
Bulladongles. I've painted some of the new Sanguinary Guard. I get people's criticism is the aesthetic, with it being quite plain and vanilla. They're still fine. They're still fun to paint. I do enjoy painting Primaris Marines, but you can see another 20% flourish from the sculptor could have made these really, really great. But there's already a load of STLs and third-party bits out there that people are adding, so that's cool. The market will provide. And then once they're done, I've got a few odd jobs to get out this week before taking an extended break from paid painting and managing the business exclusively and focusing on content creation like this shit. But other than that, yeah, just, fucking hobbying the bastard up, isn't it?
I've also been playing a fuck ton of Space Marine 2.
I need to play more Space Marine 2. I need to get on and do some of that PvE nonsense I keep getting told about.
It's still good. I checked.
So as stated up top, we are going to be talking about Underworlds. Underworlds is a box game from Games Workshop that first came out in 2015, 16?
Close enough.
I think it was late 2015. It was marketed as a competitive miniature-based card game.
It was the ultimate competitive miniatures game.
Indeed. Emphasis on competitive. We'll be talking about the initial release of the game that Kenny and I were heavily involved with. The releases that followed that, right up to the point of where we are now in Embergard, with what's, I believe, technically a new edition as opposed to the seasonal format they've been fucking churning out for all their games. And we'll be talking about that, so if you've not played any Underworlds or heard of it, check it out. You might hear something you like, and it might be a good time to get started. If you're a seasoned veteran, enjoy. Hopefully you'll understand the passion and the enjoyment that we get from Underworlds, or we got from Underworlds, definitely. And if you want to contribute, leave any comments. If we do anything or say anything you don't like, leave a comment. Whether we ignore it or not will have to remain to be seen. Otherwise, all the normal stuff, like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're listening to this on an audio layout, follow us on whatever the fuck that is. And thank you for sticking with us, and let's get balls deep in Underworld.
Am I correct in understanding that you also have a Patreon?
Yeah, I suppose. Patreon / The Unrelenting Brush, where I try and release tutorial videos weekly, along with written content and access to my hobby Discord, complete with Hobby Clinic, where I impart any and all wisdom and advice to anybody who'd like it. There's also a monthly giveaway, which for the month of October, which by now will be gone, was the Araxia?
Yes?
The big Chaos Lady on the Dragon with the Varangard. That box was given away. Whoever won that, congratulations. Whatever November's giveaway is, you'll just have to come along and have a look and see. Right, fuck this shit, let's go. So, Kenby Wildman, let's pretend I got hit by a train, survived, suffered horrific brain damage, and didn't even know what a fucking Space Marine was. What is Underworlds Embergard, or Underworlds in general?
Warhammer Underworlds, as previously stated, was what Games Workshop claimed to be the ultimate competitive miniatures game. It's a small skirmish game where you get a small warband of models per player. You also get decks of cards that allow you to do tricksy shenanigans. You can move across hexes, you can attack enemy models, and in doing so, you use ploy cards for sneaky tricks. You purchase upgrades with glory that you attain by completing objectives and killing enemy fighters. Ultimately, you win games by scoring the most glory more than your opponent. When Underworlds first came out, it was the first rendition was called Shadespire, and that kicked up a lot of confusion because everyone just called it Shadespire. Nobody called it Underworlds. It was just Shadespire. And then they released Nightbolt, and I feel like the community just sort of all went, Oh, Underworlds is the game. Oh, and now, as you inferred earlier, we're into much more seasonal content across pretty much all of the game systems, and Underworlds has been no exemption to that. So, over the past, oh my god, over the past 7 years, I don't know, over the past nth years, they have released box upon box upon box of Warhammer Underworlds.
It's pretty much been one yearly, hasn't
it? Last time I think they were up to 3 or 4 yearly for the big boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big boxes would come with slightly updated rules, 2 new warbands, all with their own cards and new boards, and it was how they tried to sort of keep the game up to date and flowing nicely with a somewhat fluid iteration to try and keep things balanced, fun, and exciting with new mechanics and updates to old ones. The game, and I will speak plainly on this, over the past, well, I guess the second half of its lifespan up to now, just got quite, not stale, it just got very difficult to keep up with. The FOMO hit really, really hard in the first couple of seasons of Underworlds, because if you wanted to stay remotely competitive, you had to have as many cards as you could get, and the way to get all of the cards was you had to buy all of the warbands with models that you necessarily didn't want to use or play or paint. I played Shadespire religiously. I played Nightvolt. I played, I think, Beastgrave was the next one.
That's the third one.
I played that game to death. I was working in a games company down in Cambridge at that point, and we were playing it every lunch break. We would play 3 games in an hour. We would just blitz through it, and we loved it to death.
So I think it's important to, when a company like Games Workshop markets a product as the ultimate competitive skirmish game, there's a lot of times they market all their releases with grandeur and massive buzzwords and, yeah, cool, awesome, I get it, whatever marketing. Shadespire, I felt, was the closest they've hit the mark to a brand new game system set in Age of Sigmar, which at that time was still finding its feet with being the new kid on the block of fantasy. It was self-contained. Everything you needed to play was in the box: the dice, the board, the cards. The rule set was plain and clear to understand. The models were obviously fucking fantastic, and the price point, I remember, I'm fairly sure it was £35, which for £35 for a box game for 2 people, if you split that and take it home, you can understand how the game works before dinner and play 3 or 4 games and get that shit nailed down. It is easily one of, I feel, the most successful launches of a new game system Games Workshop have had in the 2 decades close that I've been emphasizing in the hobby. And what it did really, really well was the deck building aspect. So as Kenny said, you pick a warband of fighters and you build a deck of ploys and upgrades which are catered from a deck list, so you can have X amount of this card, X amount of that card to fit a playstyle you want to adhere to. You then have an objective deck, which again, out of the 8 or so warbands that were in the initial Shadespire release, by the end of its cycle, there was X hundred cards. So you had a lot of options there to customize your deck. I am not a fan of card games. I've never enjoyed card games. I've been around them. I've played them. I've not enjoyed them. But the elements of Shadespire with the card deck building, with the models, the small warbands, with a nice emphasis on getting them really nicely painted, and fast, rapid games, that along with Shadow War Armageddon, I feel is one of the best systems they've launched in terms of like the past decade. So, as Kenny then said, it went on to go through several changes. It got the yearly release. And so I played Shadespire similar to Kenny to death. We went to several events locally. I was working in Games Workshop Derby at the time, and any chance we had to play it out of work, we'd stay behind and play a couple of games, or if we got some free time, we'd play games on the shop floor and demo it to people, not just because we wanted to play it, obviously. And it was absolutely freaking excellent. And it was surprisingly one of the few games I was actually relatively good at. My success with Underworlds was almost infamous amongst my gaming group. When Nightvolt, which was the second season, quotation marks, of Underworlds came out, I dropped off. I saw where it was going. I saw it was going to be heavily catered around deck releases. It followed the pattern of things like Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is a similar pattern where a new box comes out with general cards in, which you can use for any characters you've got, but you have to buy the box to get it, even if you don't want the characters. I decided to buy out at that point and stick with Shadespire, and I didn't touch it for about 4 or 5 years. I think we played a bit of Beastgrave together. We played a little bit of, because then went what, Nethermaze, and then it was
the last one. The latest one was Wintermoor. There was one before
Diachasm?
Hallowdeep. And Diachasm was one as well, actually. Diachasm was one.
Yeah, so we played
it moved into the realm of Gur around the same time, I think, as the previous edition came out.
Yeah, Gur, blimey. So we played a little bit towards the end of the last edition, again, quotation marks, of Underworlds, just to try and pick it up, because again, I enjoyed the game, but it went through a lot of changes, rule tweaks, different formats. They introduced Rivals, which was a set deck of general cards to use across any warband. That's basically what got me back into it, and I started to enjoy the game again.
But it's also, the Rivals format came in with warbands as well. So now when you bought a warband on its own, you wouldn't get a load of universal cards that you could use with any warband. The cards you got with that warband were for that warband, and it was an out-of-the-box deck that you could use in the Rivals format, which kept things consistent, which appealed to me because I enjoy the elements of deck building. I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to lay out all the cards that I've got and build a deck list and tweak and refine and try different weird things. So being able to just buy a warband that I thought was cool and just have the cards ready out of the box, that's what massively appealed to me.
I enjoyed the deck building aspect. I loved it in the early renditions of the game where it was, I'd have all my cards laid out in front of me. This is going to be good for damage, that's going to be good for objectives, and build a really nice theme deck around how I want to play. After Shadespire started coming to the end of its life and Nightfall started to replace it, they introduced FAQs, the ban list, which then came out and said you couldn't have X card in your deck for X amount of formats of tournaments or events. And that's, at that point, I checked out because I'm not fucking fannying about with what cards can I take, what cards can I not take. I don't care that much. So Rivals was nice because it was set decks in that format, comes out of the box, cool, I'm going to play this warband with this deck, let's go. And I'd say it was relatively well balanced. We played a few games, and again, I think I'm just naturally good at the game and better than you at it. So there were more instances where I won than not, but there are a few times where it was really, really close. Maybe you just pick shit warbands.
I have a knack for picking the most complicated warbands, despite the fact that I'm a simple soul. I think one thing that you have touched upon that I really do feel very strongly cannot be overemphasized is I will argue to most people that Underworlds probably has the best range of models across probably all of Games Workshop systems. I can't think of many of the warbands that have been released, and there are 50 or 60 now. I can't think of many of them that I look at and think, nah, they're a bit off.
I think Age of Sigmar benefits from that as a whole. Warcry in particular, I think, have some fucking excellent models in their range. Yeah, the Underworld stuff is fantastic. I did debate whether they were going to do a 40k equivalent of Underworlds, but they never did, and it's interesting seeing how Age of Sigmar has its offshoot games like Warcry and Underworlds, and 40k has its offshoot games of Kill Team and Horus Heresy, maybe?
Necromunda?
And it's nice to see that the studios are doing different things with different systems instead of just what they do with Age of Sigmar and 40k with the new edition is, we're going to reskin it to have this from this game system, and then we're going to do it from the other game system to this game system. And again, it's nice, it's interesting, and I think as long as they stick to the quality of the small-scale skirmish games that they are putting out, like Necromunda, Underworlds, Warcry, etc., then we'll only ever be the winners for that. So why did we stop playing Underworlds, Ken Me Wildman?
You have already said that you stopped playing because it was the complicated nuance of deck building and cards that you then couldn't bring to events and tournaments, and the, without being dramatic, predatory approach of releasing cards that you could play and be competitive with in warband boxes that you wouldn't really need. For me, I without sounding like a bit of a loser, I think people just started to take it a bit too seriously. And that probably sounds a little bit silly, but as the game grew and grew and people invested more and more, people felt the need to justify their purchases more frequently, the amount that they'd invested in the game, by going to events and winning stuff. And it stopped turning into, again, as I mentioned prior, and it's the point that it's a competitive miniatures game, I fully recognize that I'm probably just not in the target demographic, but it went from being that, oh, we're going to crack out 3 games at lunch and have a wicked time and roll about the floor in the lunchroom laughing about it, into a, oh, I'm probably just going to get stomped by that same Orc warband again with that same deck list that he's found on the internet. And again, it probably does fall down into the meta of where you play and where I was at the time, but my departure from Underworlds was much more gradual because they were still releasing warbands that I thought were cool, and the decks and the mechanics were really interesting. But just, I guess maybe I wasn't serious enough for the game, but the Rivals format brought me straight back. Because it was just, again, oh, wicked, I can just buy this now and play it out the box, and that was just more convenient for me.
You're just not a fucking glass chaser, are you?
I have not won a single glass in my life, despite the fact that I have been to more Underworlds events than any events for any other game system.
Yeah, good, innit?
That's the one.
Yeah, similarly, we did a few events, we did a few local events, and I did okay. I think I came third or second, but there was certain characters in the community that always came and took the glass, and it got to a point where it's like, there's no real point in doing this if we know who's going to win it every time, especially when they're going to events weekly and bringing and showing off their cabinet full of fucking glass trophies. And it's like, come on, mate, what are you doing? But again, maybe I just need to get good. But it was interesting to see how the game evolved, how it got so many releases by the end of it. And if it wasn't for the ease of learning the game, I feel, and the quality of the sculpts in the warbands, I don't think it would have done as well. But again, it's interesting to see how they obviously did rules for the warbands for Age of Sigmar, and some of those proved really, really popular just as they had like really strange skewy abilities you could do, or they were just a really nice way to fill like 60, 70 points in an army list. And again, from a modeling perspective, they're a nice cheap unit, especially if you're one of the competitive painters who wants to try something new. I know the warbands proved very popular at Golden Demon and other painting events. So in terms of how the game was marketed, I think all round it did exactly what you wanted it to, did exactly what you wanted it to, regardless of what side of the fence you sat on for it.
And with the price point as well, it's never been a massively expensive game with everything because the model count is so small that you don't even need to spend a Christ ton on paints and all that sort of stuff. So I think it did tick all the boxes. And despite the fact that it has withered somewhat over the last couple of years, I would say, which is maybe a bit of a dismal summation, yeah, there's no denying its initial success, its initial rise to fame, and hopefully what this new edition and Embergard is going to do for the series.
Yeah, I'll give credit where credit's due here. Nick Baton over at Warhammer World does a fucking excellent job of keeping the scene going. He's a staple of the community, running and hosting the events over there. I will go to one at some point, I swear. But it's people like that who have a genuine passion for the game and the formats it's played in and the community who play it that help maintain the system. So without those people, I probably wouldn't have heard or had anything to do with Underworlds. But again, it's understanding the series of players that the game is aimed at. So if you like a casual Friday afternoon, Friday evening at Warhammer World and Bugman's playing Underworlds, crack the book on, get under it. But I'm happy to see Underworlds is still being supported. I think I would have been upset if it just got swept under the rug. I've still got all my Shadespire cards and all my warbands. So for Embergard, I'm going to try and give it a little bit more love than I did towards the end of last edition of Underworlds. But before we go into that, let's talk a little bit more about some of the changes in comparison to Underworlds and Embergard.
So with Embergard, I can't say it. With
Embergard!
Very good. With Embergard being ushered in as the second edition of Warhammer Underworlds, it is bringing with it a series of some changes could be regarded as cataclysmic, earth-shattering. It's a completely different game. It's really not.
Fuck it, I'm out.
And there are also quite a few smaller, more nuanced changes. And largely, I look at all of them, and I think they're all positive. There are some big changes coming to the game that ultimately have caused a bit of a stir. Some of them are pretty blatant, but we'll go into that in a little bit. Going over some of the big changes. The biggest change, I would argue, is that warband decks, I'm doing the bunny ears, the quote-unquote, warband decks are now completely gone. Presumably when you buy a warband, you're getting the warband, you're getting a warband card that details abilities to the warband itself, unique abilities that only they can use. You're also getting the cards that represent the fighters in the warband and their stats, but you are no longer getting a deck of cards bespoke to that warband for their own objectives, ploys, upgrades, etc. Now, they are doubling down in the Rivals format, and all Rivals decks are being released at this moment, as I understand, as universal decks. So you will buy a box that has either a number of Rival decks or a Rival deck separate, and you will be able to use that with any given warband. My concerns here was that this would cause some of the warbands to lose a lot of their distinction, a lot of their individuality, but from what we've played, I don't think that's the case. I think that was maybe a knee-jerk reaction on my part. The abilities on the cards are suitably thematic. In Embergard, you get the Skaven warband, and we really should have wrote down the names of them because they're needlessly complicated. I think it's Snickets, Tunnelers, who are the Skaven guys going in the tunnels of Embergard to try and steal the Emberstone. Their abilities are superb, where they can skitter across the board, and they have one which is simply you have a rat with a bomb on its back. One of the abilities is to explode the rat and damage any models within the vicinity. Fantastic. And the other two abilities, as I understand, are effectively warp charging themselves almost to death, where they have a better chance of doing damage or having additional actions at the risk of blowing themselves up, because go, more, power, kill. And the Embergard, who are the Embergard the actual name of the Stormcast? I think that's right.
Emberwatch?
The Emberwatch sounds right. And these guys are there to defend the tunnels. They are there to seek out the vermin and destroy them. And all their stuff is just navigating the tunnels. So they're quite nippy. They're quite quick because they're the. Are they the Raptor? No, they're Vanguard. Stormcast Vanguard?
Yes,
the quick
they
guys.
are. Yeah, it's interesting because I find this Stormcast Warband has a lot in relation with the original Steel Hearts champions from Shadespire, because it was 3 fighters. You've got your person with the big weapon, your leader who's kind of multi-purpose, and then one double-weaponed DPS character. So that was really nice. It's almost like a homage to that. So I thought that was great.
And the Stormcast guys, yeah, they're quite versatile. They're a bit of a jack of all trades. They're quite beefy. They're pretty difficult to take down. But again, that comes into whichever rival deck you choose to play. So there are 4 decks included in the Embergard box, and they all conform to a different playstyle, which is now a staple of this edition of Underworlds, where decks tend to have a specific playstyle. There's aggro, there's defensive, there's more board possession and taking objectives, and then there is, I think it's called flex, I can't remember, but the 4th one is all about being a bit weird and a bit versatile. The deck for that in the Embergard box is Countdown to Cataclysm, I believe it's called, and it's a very, very weird and bizarre deck where you're almost rewarded for your fighters dying across the game. So it's not, oh, I'm just going to send all my guys in to die in the first round. You get points for them dying as the game goes on. You get weird objectives to increase your Cataclysm value, which can then reward you more glory based on the objective cards. So all the Rivals decks in themselves feel quite unique and have very different playstyles, which is going to conform to different players, which is awesome. But then tie that in with the abilities that you have for each independent warband. And I think there's still plenty of work there for people to do, where they get a Rivals deck, they get a warband, and they see which one fits the best.
So interestingly, one of my issues with previous edition Underworlds going from Shadespire to Nightbot was I don't want to have to buy all these fucking cards just to stand a chance of playing the game. Essentially, it's exactly the same thing in this edition, but now I don't have to worry about faction-specific cards. That will never see the light of day. I've still got the old Skaven and Fireslayer cards in a protective folder that I've never seen the light of day since leaving that box. And this is essentially no different, but it's nice because it's almost like your deck is your class and then your warband is your faction. So you can gear your playstyle if you want to play fast and aggressive to a warband you really like, let's say some Auric Cruel Boys. You can take that for a spin and see how it goes, and you can tweak your play style and develop your skills and ability to play the game with the warband you love, playing the style you want to. There's obviously going to be good fits and bad fits. I probably wouldn't go for the Blazing Assault one if you were the Skaven, just because your damage is so low and your fighters are so weak. Well, someone might be able to make it work. It might depend on the objectives they pull, or the board style they're playing on, or the abilities of the fighters in the warband. So overall, I think that change is good. I think it's a lot easier myself to manage and play the game and prep for the game if I know here's a set deck of cards, keep the cards together so you don't fucking lose them, bring that to a game, go. As opposed to a big deck card list, cool, I can bring that. You can't bring that card, it's no longer welcome in this format. Overall, I think that's a positive change.
Mm. And it's worth pointing out as well that they have the ominous they, it's been stated in Warhammer community articles that typically some warbands will dedicate themselves better to certain Rivals decks. So you will have some warbands that are quite smashy, like I presume some Auric ones are going to be. And so if you couple those with a rival deck that is all about, being aggressive and killing enemy fighters, you're probably going to do quite well. But there's nothing to stop you from taking a warband that is, say, a small model count, such as the Emberwatch, which is only 3 models, and then using a Rivals deck that's all about board possession. There's nothing stopping you doing that. It's going to be a challenge, but if you want to set yourself that challenge and play Underworlds in hard mode, knock yourself out, go mad. And I think that level of flexibility and versatility is something that reignites that flame in me that loves Underworlds so much.
And again, it also depends on what you're up against. If I've got my Drom's Gore Chosen, who in previous edition of Underworlds played very, not defensive, but quite stoic. You'd have to have fighters in the middle ground or in my deployment area, my area of the board, to get your objectives. That was their rival deck format. If I then want to play them aggressively with Blazing Assault, because the fighters are quite stoic, they are quite hardy in terms of health, and they're also quite aggressive and do a lot of damage, that could fit them well. But then if I'm up against the Emberwatch, because again, it's only 3 models, they're a lot hardier than what I'm going to be averagely expecting. So that could backfire on me, and they could then use their maneuverability, despite being the same size warband, to get around the back of the board and get on the objectives using their nippy Raptor assault nonsense. So there's still a really nice depth of versatility and variance in the game, and in the games we're going to play with the warbands and the rival decks we're going to have available to us. So overall, I am excited to play more. I think the way they've approached the format of the game, as opposed to Shadespire's initial launch with deck customization and so on, and now going whole ham in with just the rivals decks and the warband, those are your 2 variants. I don't think it's a bad idea, and it's certainly got me inspired to play more Underworlds for sure.
Anyway, other changes. Magic dice, gone. In the previous edition of Underworlds, some warbands had a spellcaster, and they had either attacks or abilities or cards in their deck that were reliant on spellcasting, and for those you would need specific magic dice. These are gone. Cast to the wind, flushed down the toilet. They just don't exist anymore. I am completely fine with this. I don't need an extra 3 bespoke dice to carry around with me that I will inevitably lose or forget for a card that I may never pull in a game that I play in any given event. I have no issue with this whatsoever. It keeps things simpler and keeps things more accessible. Another change, which I've not seen anyone notice, is scatter. Scatter is also completely gone. Scatter previously in the last edition was you would get a hex token that had all different dice faces on it. You would place where you want it to go, and then you'd roll a series of dice that would determine the chain that the scatter token goes in. Even explaining it just makes my brain turn to milkshake and makes me not want to do it. So I think the fact that nobody seems to be shedding a single tear of the fact that scatter is gone probably speaks volumes to the fact that it isn't necessary and probably wasn't in the first place. Despite the fact that it does mean that my favourite card of all time is now also defunct with the rest. Rest in peace. Pocket Squig, gone but not forgotten. Other big changes, roll-offs are simpler. This is a very small change, but roll-offs in the previous edition of Underworlds were weirdly superfluous.
They were fine, if just a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, roll 4 dice, and then whoever has most crits wins. If you draw, whoever has most hammers wins. If you draw swords all the way down, and if you're still drawed, roll again. Now, you roll 1 dice. Cool, wicked, done, sorted. There's a myriad of other smaller changes that have come in as well.
The board is now no longer 2 boards. Before it was 2 boards that you would each bring one of these boards, roll off, you put the first one down, whoever lost the roll off then puts their one down and tilts the board to be the shape and design they want it to be. So you could have a long board with the 2 short edges together, you could have a wide board with the 2 long edges together, you could have it tilted so there was half board on half, which again was nice because if you played a defensive warband that wanted to tunnel your enemies through a small narrow corridor, it enabled you to play that versatility. Whereas now with just the one board, it's put it down, the other person chooses the orientation, put your objective stand done.
And I believe that the boards are technically a bit bigger. There's more hexes on them, which we've seen in the games that we've played, because now it feels like much more of a challenge for fighters to get from one end of the board all the way to the other. The Skaven find this much easier than the Stormcast do in the Embergard box, but the Stormcast do have some shenanigans that can allow them to do this. But it's a change that I'm believing is positive because again, I now need to bring fewer things with me to a game. But in terms of what the wider impact is, I'm not going to speak too confidently on it because I want to see what the community does. I know that a lot of people had some pretty strong opinions on longboarding. I suffered the Catafrane Dex Storm, Catafrane Steelheart longboard, back in Shadespire or Nightbolt. Yeah, I suffered that at 2 or 3 events I went to, and honestly, that was enough for me to not play the game for a few months, but then I came back. So
for those who don't know, it involved one player's warband sitting at the back of the board on objectives as far away from the opponent as they can, drawing through their cards to unlock this artifact, and all they had to do was sit there and draw artifacts, and it just was awfully boring to play. It was very, very gamey, and I felt it wasn't in the spirit of the game, despite the fact, obviously, it's in the deck, so it was meant to be an element of the game or a play style of the game. But again, when you go to events and see several people doing the same thing, it just doesn't make for a very fun experience. So hopefully there's not elements of that in this edition. If there are, people are going to find them, and I'll keep an eye out for that. But we'll see. We'll see what perseveres and what doesn't.
But another big change that they've brought in is that they've announced today on the Warhammer community website that they are going to be doing, I think it's quarterly updates like they did with all the other systems. It's going to get a balance update each quarter, which will keep the game fresh. It'll allow them to jump on any major issues rather than needing to wait for a new edition to come out. I think the Catafrane Steelheart stuff was what brought out the first major FAQ, where I think they then upped the Catafrane relics to cost 2 glory rather than 1.
Glory it cost, so it made it infinitely hard to do, and people just dropped it. Which again, it's a competitive game. I get it, the meta shifts, but just don't be fucking shit.
Yeah.
So another thing with the board styles I'll run it is the lack of features on the board. So before you had cover, lethal, staggering hexes. They now
cover hexes.
Yeah, there was that one time where they brought out was it in Nightvault with the 3D tokens you put down?
Yeah, which I didn't mind. It was a bit of a cash grab, shock, gasp, call the police. It was cool. I could see why they did it once, and then they did it with Beastgrave as well, and then never did it again.
Yeah, which is fine.
But with the what were we talking about? What were we just talking about?
Embergard.
Yeah, I know we're talking
the board.
The boards, yes, the hexes. Thank you. So now the hexes that are printed onto the board you still get the blocked hex, which is you can't see through, you can't move onto it. The red hexes are still there, but they're no longer lethal hexes. They are simply stagger hexes. From what I can see, unless I'm missing something glaring, lethal hexes are gone. The board can no longer do damage to you, unless, of course, you have a card or ability that says otherwise.
But again, at the time of release, we're only going to have the one board that we know of, so whether they do future boards with different features on will remain to be seen. But at the minute, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think overcomplicating the game with scatter, magic, various features on the board put a lot of people off, especially those who started with Shadespire and saw the simplicity of the game and the bare bones you needed to have a really good fucking fun couple of games. You could play a game of that and play 3 games in an afternoon and have a win, loss, draw, and that's what makes the game brilliant. So hopefully the spirit of that has carried over, and we've played, 3 games so far, and it's been 2 for me, 1 for you.
So far.
Yeah, so there's still elements of that. And again, although we've played a lot of the previous edition of the game, it is still new to us, so I'm sure we'll learn more as we go and see what the tally ends up to be.
Well, another big change is how upgrades work. In the previous edition of Underworlds, you would accumulate glory through scoring objective cards or killing enemy fighters. Once you have glory, you could then spend, and again I'm doing quote unquote, you could spend that glory to put any upgrades that you have in your hand as a card onto your fighters. You would spend that glory for the purpose of upgrades, but the glory would still count towards your tally. It's different now in the second edition. With Embergard coming out, the rules are updated so that the accumulated glory that you have comes to a total. So let's say I've got 4 glory that I've got through objective cards or killing enemy fighters.
That's about your average, actually.
Yeah, well, indeed, if I'm lucky if I reach double digits at any point. But with that 4 glory, if I have upgrade cards in my hand, I can still spend, again, quote unquote, spend that glory on upgrades. However, the amount of upgrades that you have active on your warband at any one time can never exceed the amount of glory that you have scored. And that may sound a little bit sort of, oh, well, how does that make sense? Isn't that just how it's always played? The nuance is, when a fighter dies in your warband, if they have any upgrade cards, those cards are discarded. They are just fobbed off to the 4 winds, scattered to the earth, and never to be seen again. So that means that if I had an upgrade that was worth 2 glory on my fighter, and he died, that 2 glory that I spent is now freed up to spend on other upgrades for surviving fighters. It doesn't change the amount of glory that I have for the purpose of winning, but it means that those upgrades that I've purchased now basically refund to me so I can use other upgrades.
There was nothing as fucking annoying as turning up one of your fighters to have 4 or 5 upgrades, and you're like, oh, he's my little absolute bad man, he's going to score this many glory by doing this, and then he gets one bombed by the Fleshhound from Magor's Fiends, and it's like, great, fucking thanks, that's all that glory wasted. I like this system now. I like that it's this kind of pool of resources that replenishes when fighters die and you basically get their glory refunded. I think that adds a lot more chances in the game and a lot more kind of persistence to play, because again, if you've racked up all this glory, spent it on upgrades, and they're now dead, it's kind of like, oh great, well, he just needs to carry on killing me and accrue all the glory that he needs to from the objectives, and that'll be that. Again, positive change, I think.
And a massive, massive change, which I think you've got some mixed feelings on, is how crits work. In Underworlds, your attack dice and your defense dice have bespoke faces on them that determine the success of your attack or your save based on the characteristics of your fighter on their fighter card. Previously, in the old edition, if you rolled a crit to attack or defend, chances are you are absolutely golden. Your opponent could roll 4 successful attack dice with the hammer symbol that they need, but you could roll 1 crit and then all of those successes mean absolutely nothing. It was great when it happened for one of you, but it was really, really pants for the other person. What they've done to bring this change in is now a crit is simply a success that could have additional benefits. So, for instance, if my opponent were to roll the 4 dice they need to attack and they get 4 hammers, what they need, I roll a single defense dice and get a crit. They have more successes than me. They have 4, I have 1. Therefore, their attack still succeeds. But with the crit, I believe they have an ability now called Stand Firm or Last Stand, something like that, where I can use that crit to decrease the damage that I would suffer from that attack, and I also cannot be driven back. So for me, I feel that this does make the crits still feel impactful. They still have a place. It's just a lot less running your fingers through your hair and shrieking into the desk when you roll 5 dice, all hitting successes, and your opponent rolls a single crit and you really desperately want to go to the pub.
But I really like that for fuck's sake element of the game. I've played several games where literally a dude had to get me off an objective to stop me scoring 3 glory, and he'd hit me with 3 hammers, and I'd roll 1 dice and just be like, come on, please. And that crit symbol would show up, and he would be horrendously upset, and I would just be sat there with a shit-eating grin. I like that. It's similar to how punishing Blood Bowl can be, and I think that's part of the system. That's probably my least favourite change in how crits now aren't as what the fuck as they were. But I see why they've done it. I see for the purposes of keeping people in the game more, and for, again, stopping those
feel bad moments.
Yeah, those shit the bed moments where it's like, I really, really just need one good roll and then you fluff it.
Yeah, I worry. I'll, at the risk of sounding dramatic, if you're at an Underworlds event and having been to quite a few, and you're sitting at one end of the hall, and all you hear down the far end is "ah," you know that someone has just rolled a single crit against someone who was absolutely wailing on the enemy fighter and has won the game with a single dice roll. And those moments, I think, are not going to happen as often now with how the system works. I will miss them, but it's easy to hear the celebrations and the elation of the victor, and often you won't see the person sat across the table with their head in their hands, really, really just trying to keep it together, with a dice roll that should have, by all accounts, succeeded, but didn't.
Dice game, innit? Get good.
It's a dice game and a card game, so you're just dealing with 2 different types of fate there. Trying to think of any other big changes that have come in from Embergard. There's still a lot. There's a lot that we've not really touched on. Are there any you want to cover?
No, I think we've covered everything that I want to, outside of, obviously, warbands and stuff and what's happening with those.
There's a big question hovering over my head, which is how the Rivals cards are... Well, 2 big questions. How are they selling warbands, and how are they selling the relic decks? My suspicion is that they will sell boxes with 2 warbands in, almost like a starter box or a battle box, whatever else. Across the season, they'll sell several boxes, and they will feature 2 warbands with either 2 or 4 relic decks. Very much as they've done with Embergard, maybe to a lesser extent.
Relic decks? You mean rival decks?
Sorry, yes, rival decks.
For fuck's sake.
I'm the worst. I reckon they'll do that, and then warbands will be sold where you just get the fighters and the fighter cards. I don't know what that means for the price. I would hope the price would reduce because
what were we on for warbands at the end of the last edition? For a box of fighters and cards.
Oh god,
25 was it?
What for the last edition?
Yeah, for just like a box of.
No, it was more than that. It was
not the box game. I know the box game.
No, it was
like 50
it was. Do you know what? You keep chatting. I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah, so I think price point in fucking anything is going to be massively important to the game's longevity and survival. There are some systems out there, and again, I'm going to go back to MCP, where the game's brilliant, everybody enjoys it, it's got a great scene, and if you're a fan of the Marvel Universe, fucking go ham. But the money you pay for those boxes just to get a few of the cards for the characters you don't give a fuck about is so off-putting. So, in terms of how this is marketed, and in terms of how they target this to not just players like us who played the previous edition and are excited to play more, but for new players, that's going to be really, really important, especially in Shadespire and Underworlds had a massive market in Warhammer stores. We ran events in Warhammer stores. That was all part of growing the scene and getting it off the ground. That then fizzled out when Warhammer stores, post-COVID, stopped hosting events and stopped hosting gamings. It's then down to the third-party stores and the independent retailers to try and support that. So if they've not got a scene, they can try and get it off the ground. If they do have a scene, they should be okay. But if they don't, and they struggle to get it off the ground, it's going to be interesting to see how this affects that, because it needs event support, it needs class support, and it needs to be properly promoted by stores. I think without all 3 of those, it's going to suffer.
There's an interesting point there. Other than Blood Bowl, I believe that Underworlds is the only Games Workshop game that had a video game rendition released that was...
A direct port, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. That is now probably going to sink it to the ground. I can't remember the last time anyone spoke to me about it, so it's probably not suffering massive success right now anyway, but I think it's a very interesting thing that they maybe took a gamble there to say, let's try and keep the scene strong by enabling people to play digitally in a way that we can sort of fundamentally support, but we'll see. Anyway, back to the price of warbands. So they are no longer selling any on the Warhammer website because, of course, all the old ones are now defunct. But currently on Element Games, they are £23.38. So 26 quid, yeah.
That's not bad.
It's not bad.
For a gang of guys with the cards you need to play, I'd say that's fine.
And when you put that next to Kill Team, where the Kill Teams are like 40 quid?
Fucking talk to me about Kill Team.
40 quid? Warcry's the same? 40
quid, of which you need 2 boxes now for certain Kill Teams.
Not great. So we will see. I can't imagine them releasing new warbands in the new edition and being cheaper than that, despite the fact that cards were a lot heavier than the plastic frames.
Yep.
So if you try and factor in...
It costs more to print as well.
And indeed. Localization as well. Print the cards in different language. So the fool in me hopes that the warbands are cheaper, but I think that's a fool's hope.
I agree.
So, but of course, now you have to consider you're buying the warbands and the relic decks, the rival decks separately. Yep. So you are ultimately going to be paying more.
But I think I prefer that then if they launch, let's say, Cities of Sigmar warband with a deck for a playstyle I have no fucking interest in.
Yeah.
Personally, I would rather have this 2 boxes of warbands because I'm a painter before I'm a gamer of anything. So cool, I'll have those 2 warbands, I'll paint them up. If I don't want one, I'll sell it on, and then I'll buy the card that I want to play that playstyle for. But again, it depends on if you're a completionist. The great thing about Shadespire, I keep talking about fucking Shadespire more than we're talking about Embergard, is I bought every warband for that game system, I bought every release for that system, and I've still got it, and I've not had the soul to part with it because it just reminds me of how much I enjoyed that. Whether I get that again with Embergard, we'll have to wait and see. It depends on the kind of staggered releases and how they go about marketing it.
And that brings us into the changes that we are unsure of or ultimately not thrilled about. And I think that's arguably the biggest one. Every single card that anyone owns for Underworlds,
fucking gone.
Useless. Obviously, we'll be that guy. If you want to play the old edition with your friends or run an old edition tournament or an event or whatever, no one's going to come around your house and shoot you. You go bloody mad. You can use as many of those cards as you want. But ultimately, for any supported events, competitive play, or anything, let's face it, wanting to be relatively in the pulse with the game, any existing card, those hundreds and hundreds of cards, are now completely useless.
Yeah, that's how it is now. If you play a Games Workshop game, chances are you bought paper. That's not going to be worth fuck all in the next year or two. And if I'd known there was a 2nd edition of Underworlds coming out, I'd have probably seen it coming, because this is what they do. It's a business. They want to make money. They want to launch new products to be bought and sold and have the old products come off the market because they're no longer viable. So am I surprised? No. Am I disappointed? Not really, because I wasn't playing much. The Rivals decks I got were with the warbands, so I wanted the warbands more than I wanted the cards, so they were just going to be part of the system anyway. I can see a lot of people who dedicated a lot of time to the entirety of Underworlds Edition 1 being upset about this. But at the end of the day, you're a collector, you have a collection. You probably knew this was going to fucking happen at some point.
I, for one, am not thrilled that I now have hundreds of cards that are sleeved. The cards I can part with. Again, similar boat to you. This was going to happen at some point. If we want the game to continue to thrive and grow, which we do, because we enjoy the game and we want to play more of it, then we need to, grow and survive, adapt or die, all that sort of nonsense. But now I have to go through and unsleeve every card, because I'm still going to need those sleeves for all the new cards that are coming out.
Is that not infinitely better than the cards being slightly different size, so you have to buy new sleeves for them?
We should check that.
I'm fairly sure they are standard card size.
It's got to be in it.
Yeah, they must.
Yeah, it's got to be in it.
Fucking soon find out when I flip my fucking bitch.
Other big change that has come through, which again shouldn't really be a massive surprise to anyone, is currently there is no confirmation about. Well, actually, as of today, there is.
As of today, being the 21st of October at the time of recording.
Is that? It is. Well done. So, existing warbands prior to today, nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew if they'd be supported, if we get new cards, nothing. But today, they announced that 16 of the warbands that they said would still be supported have been confirmed. It's 4 from each alliance. I'm not going to list them all off because I'm lazy, but we've got the Hexbane's Hunters, Canaan's Reavers from the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Ephelim's Pandemonium, the Zinch one. We've got Drom's Gore Chosen. Yeah, they're in there as well. The Dread Pageant are still good. Grinkrak's Loon Court, the Goblins are still good.
I imagine the main ones that won't be there will be Steel Hearts Champions because they're old Stormcast. The Beasts of Chaos guys because Beasts of Chaos aren't in Age of Sigmar anymore.
Well, it's just 16. It's just 16 out of 50, 60 warbands.
That wasn't 50, 60 warbands.
Yeah.
Oh.
Loads. Because if you try and consider all the starter boxes that they released as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, you've listed 2 that I give a fuck about, so I'm happy.
But they have also said that they will... So those warbands are being released with their own cards. So those fighters will be supported. They will, of course, you'll be able to choose a rival deck of your choice to go with them. And they say that more rival decks are coming. They have also said that most, and I believe they did specify most of the existing warbands would be supported via digital cards, so PDFs or whatever else.
And that's just for the fighter ability cards and then the fighter cards themselves.
Correct. Again, they will not get any warband-specific cards to deck build or anything. It is just to use those fighters themselves.
Which I suppose isn't too bad. Like It's not horrific having a tablet up with a PDF of the fighter abilities and then the fighter cards.
Yeah, you
can make do with that.
You're not having to print off 32 cards in the correct size and then cut them out and then laminate them. No, nobody's got time for that. But with the 16 warbands that they announced today that are going to be re-released and supported, they're being sold in boxes of 4, so each Grand Alliance. So if you want the order box, you get Gundrix Profiteers, the Caradrons, you get the Lumineth guys whose names I can't remember, Hunters Hexbane's Hunters, and another one whose name I can't recall and probably don't really care about. So you'll get an Order one, Death, Destruction, and a Chaos one. Kagra's Reavers, they're also there. No Nurgle ones.
Oh, shit.
So what do you think that means?
Yeah, they're probably going to get some new ones, aren't they?
I would suspect so.
You said Drom's Gore Chosen, didn't you?
Yeah, they're in there.
Good. Nogor's Fiends probably.
No.
Oh, fuck's sake.
But again, they'll get digital rules.
Fuck this game.
So that has placed us all in a little bit of a I think it's positive. It's ultimately positive. We're all just sort of. I know that there's going to be so many people out there who are sitting there saying, "What about my warband?"
But again, like I'd be a lot less not miffed, but perturbed, fucking flippant about this if they didn't spend a portion of this year and last year re-releasing a load of the old warbands. Because again, it just feels like, again, it's a fucking business. We've got all these models, they're no good for the new edition, get them sold within the next 12 months, because we don't want them sat in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Just a bit shit, innit?
Well, what was the Dark Oath box that came out for Age of Sigmar, like a few weeks before 3rd edition launched?
Yep.
So the little PDF in there was useless. Thankfully, it didn't come with a full book.
Yep.
But we see this now. This is par for the course. You can complain, you can be unhappy about it, but I don't think it's going to change unless you vote with your wallet. As we say, if you don't care about something, the best thing you can do is vote with your cash monies. Don't just moan on the internet. It's not going to get you very far.
So overall, what are your feelings about previous editions of Underworlds leading up to where it is now?
I believe the spirit of the game is still there. The deck building still exists. We haven't touched on that. The deck building still exists in the format it did towards the end of the previous edition, which is called the Nemesis format, which is the sort of opposing to Rivals. So the Nemesis format still exists very much as you would expect it to, where you get 2 Rivals decks and you blend them together. This means that you can still go into that element of deck building, which I know you've said that you enjoy and you'd probably be keen to give a go. So if you wanted to get an aggro deck and then blend it with a possession deck, you could do that. If you wanted to blend 2 really weird decks together, like that Cataclysm Countdown one, go mad, but that's giving me a nosebleed and a headache just thinking about it. And there's all sorts of conditions in there that have to be met, so it's still half of your power cards have to be ploys and the other half have to be upgrades. You can't have more than the other. You can still have 12 objectives, but 6 of them can be surges. You can't have more than 6 to stop you from trying to score all the glory as quick as you can, because that would just be a really crap experience. So that exists, and I'm really happy to see that in there, because it actually tempts me to try it a little bit. I've not really wanted to try deck building over the past year or 2 of Underworlds, but I reckon I would jump in and give it a go this time.
Well, that's it, because in terms of events I've seen, it's always been Rivals. I've not seen many Nemesis formatted events.
The Nemesis...
Is that just because I've not seen them?
I think it's because you've not seen them. Again, Nick Baton flies the Underworld's flag high and proud. The Nemesis clashes do still take place at Underworld, at Warhammer World, and various other places. I know that Sanctuary, north of Nottingham, does them. Other shops do them. I think if you've not seen them, it's because you're not interested and you're not looking for them, which speaks to the game. Hopefully, the release of this new edition, which will make it more accessible and more simplified, will help to address that. Other positive things that have come through from the previous edition, I'm just glad that they've not massively revamped and changed all the fundamentals of the rules. They've removed the things that I would regard as chaff. Scatter gone, magic gone, the superfluous and really weird verbose additional hexes on the boards, they're gone. I think they've done well to keep the fat of the game there, but none of the sort of lean aftermath that I honestly didn't care about.
Yeah, I think the accessibility of the game is crucially important. That's going to be based on two things. First is price point, and second is supportability. So the game benefits its own kind of benefits by being so ridiculously easy to play. If you've never played a game like Underworlds, you'll look at the book, look at the cards, and think, what the holy shit is this nonsense? I guarantee, give it a couple of hours, get a friend around who you'd like to play games with, get some tins in, you'll have it within an hour, and you'll be fucking loving it by hour 3. It is honestly, and I can't understate how fun this game is once you've got it under your belt. That's great to see it being ported over. Again, it's similar to how Blood Bowl 2.0 is the same game with a few little tweaks, which I think this is. It's a game that was conceived, massive success initially, carried on growing, but then started to fizzle off, and by the end of it, it wasn't really getting anywhere near the love it did.
Bloated so
it bloated itself fucking massively. And hopefully this re-envisioning and this reimagining of the game, based on the core mechanics that were there originally, helps them understand to sustain that and make sure that's the focus of the game instead of giving it needless nonsense and additional rules. And the regular updates I appreciate, especially for competitive formats and events, but don't do the 40k stuff where you're getting regular changes every 3 months where by the time you've played 2 games, something's changing and then need to rejig everything.
But the swiftness of the game helps with that, where I think we do this all the time. We are pretty quick players. We could play a couple of games of 40k in an afternoon. We have played 3 games of Warcry in an hour before, easily. If we sat down and played Underworlds, we could rinse, I don't know, like 10 games in an afternoon.
Yep.
Easy.
Yep.
Easy. But then also, that's probably because we're not super competitive, tactical, mega brain people with steam coming out of our ears, so we try and consider every tactical nuance, because we just want to roll dice and make stupid noises.
I am with this game. Fucking get good, scrub.
That's the one. Anyway, we can move more into the future of Underworlds with the 2nd edition and Embergard, and into some fun, because we all like fun here. Games should be fun. Speculative warbands. We've already said and insinuated, and I think there is something in the rulebook that does tease what 2 of the upcoming warbands will be. I suspect they will probably be announced in the next couple of days, so I'm not going to bother mentioning them. You guys will probably know by this point, so good for you. Speculative warbands. We have already seen the existing warbands that are coming with the cards. We've already said that digital cards are being released for all the others. But what's some warbands that we would like to see? For me, I would love to see a Nurgle one. I said on that.
Sounds dumb.
It does sound dumb. But I would love to see another Ossiarch warband, because the one that they have done was ridiculously cool.
Have they got 1 or 2?
Just 1, isn't it?
I thought they had 2. Oh, it's the Warcry guys, I'm thinking.
Yeah. No, they've got Canaan's Reavers.
Clippy clops.
Yeah, they've got Canaan's Reavers, who is the great big Mortazan Soul Reaper with a massive fuck-off axe. They've got an archer, and then it's just like a Mortek Guard with like a mace and a great sword, and then there's a
happy grinning faces.
There's a spellcaster in there with a little netherite obelisk. It's just super cool, and I'd love to see some more of that. In fact, if it was a warband of 3 models, but they were like the Immortis Guard and maybe a Stalker, I would be all over that. I'd buy into that. Other than that, I want to see more lizard men. We won't go into that because I think they're also teased.
Does that mean Wormsplat on in the new edition?
They get digital rules. Other than that, the only other one, because we've had 2 Dark Oath warbands, we've had a Slaves to Darkness Chaos Warrior one.
2 Cities of Sigmar ones? Or just 1?
Hexbane's...
The Witch Huntery ones, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Hexbane's Hunters, and... No, so a Cities of Sigmar one would be good.
I think it's a good opportunity for a Cities of Sigmar one, maybe with an Ogre in.
That would be cool.
I don't know, it depends. With Cities of Sigmar, we don't know if they're going to lean into the purely human aspects of it or include more new Dwarden and Dark Elf models. We simply don't know. Personally, I don't give a fuck about those guys. Just give me mortal men and women all day, every day. But yeah, I'd love to see a little low model count, 3-4 model count, Cities of Sigmar warband. I think that'd be cool.
Well, they're also really good for the Auric warbands. The Auric warbands have all looked really good because they were some of the first ones that got released. It was Head Racket. No, Iron Skulls, Iron Face lads.
Iron titties.
Something about orcs smashing stuff.
I like pints.
Well, actually, another interesting point is that there are no more large fighters. And large fighters were fighters that had 5 hit points or more, and killing them gave you an additional glory.
Oh shit, wasn't there that dumb White Dwarf expansion which let a Gargant run around?
Yes, there was. We never played that, and I'd love to because I've got a Gargant at home. But
well, last edition, innit? Fucking never mind.
Molog the Troggoth was a large fighter, and he had a great big base. I don't even know if that would fit on the board anymore. But that's all changed now because when you kill a fighter, the amount of glory you get, the bounty, is dependent on them and is on their card. So that's quite cool as well. But back to speculative warbands. Oh god, I would love more goblin stuff, more squig stuff. Ooh, I'll tell you what'd be cool. The web spinners, the web spinner goblins.
Spiders.
Because they've not had an update for a while.
Spotters.
Their models are getting quite old now, so that might be a cool way to introduce them, even if it's just a couple of...
Eight-legged beasties.
Because that would be awesome, because I bet they could like crawl over stuff and maybe go on, maybe they're faster on the edge of the board or something as they crawl on the wall. That would be quite cool. What about you? Any other speculative warbands you'd like to kick off?
Pints. Probably... Oh, I don't know, because Dark Oath got a really early one. I think they got one in Nightvolt.
Yeah, because
those models aged really, really badly, really quickly. After
because they came with one of the first casters.
They did, yeah. I don't know. Corn guys would be nice. Garrick's Reavers aren't going, are they?
They're getting digital.
Game's fucking
supposedly they say most warbands. I reckon if one was going to go, it would be Mollog, but we'll see. We will see about that one. What? You've got loads of Age of Sigmar stuff. Surely there must be something else that you want. We're literally looking at cabinets now, trying to discern just where's that spark of creativity.
Pints. I don't know. More Stormcast ones probably. We'll probably get another rat one at some point.
Boo.
Yeah, because the original Shadespire had 2 Stormcast, 2 Corn.
Garrick's Reavers and Magor's Fiends.
Fiends, and then the Vanguard guys and Steelheart Champions. So they'll probably do that again if they stick to a formula. Otherwise, in terms of new warbands, rumoured new races coming to Age of Sigmar. I know we keep hearing rumours of Chaos Dwarfs. That'd be cool. Beasts of Chaos are gone. I like Beasts of Chaos. Never fucking mind. Demons.
Demons would be cool. Any flavour of demon or just all of them? Because we've got
ones, ideally.
Well, we've got the Thricefold Befoulment. Oh no, that's the Nurgle one. The three Slanesh demons. They were released fairly recently.
Oh, those fucking weebs.
Not the Dread Pageant, the other one.
No, the weebs.
The weebs, yes.
Fucking weeaboos.
Oh my way, Malshindaru. Cool. I think that's it before we accidentally hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, no, Cities of Sigmar, I throw on, but then I'd also just like a gang of steel helms who've had enough. They're all fucking morton and bandaged up. They're part of a Dawnbringer crusade and just want to get it done or go home. And just have them as like, proper little fucking run.
Actually, let's think about this. It's set in the realm of Akshi, the realm of fire, as everything else is now.
Yeah.
So it's surely going to be Dwarden. Like maybe we'll see new Fire Slayers.
Not long had one though. This is the thing.
They've not long had one.
They had the fucking
Chosen Axes were in Shadespire.
Thinking about the fucking Warcry guys again with the little eggs. Eggs. Yeah. If you've got any warbands you'd like to see, do leave a comment. If there's any warbands you think are going to be great in this new edition, leave a comment. If there's any warbands you've sad to go, leave an F in the comments. Yeah, let us know your thoughts, guys. We're just chatting shit. Shit. There we are, guys. That wraps up our over an hour of talking absolute nonsense about Underworlds, Embergard, and Underworlds of Past Pastures. We hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that cringy social media nonsense. If you would like to see more, let us know. Leave a comment. Say I like pints. 10 out of 10. Any sign-offs or closings you want to say about Underworlds, Kemi Wanan? We'll probably have played a few more games by the time this goes out.
I would bloody hope so.
Do we know when the digital bits are coming out for the current warbands?
Not at this time, no.
Probably.
I think they've said.
A week or two.
I think they've said imminently after release. They've also said that another 2 warbands will be released within the weeks of the release, as well as it's all going to come flowing out. I think we'll see most of what we want before Christmas.
Cool.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Fortunately, Underworlds, whilst it is marketed as a competitive game, can also be heralded as quite casual. And as someone who does enjoy a casual chit-chat about ridiculous toy soldiers, I couldn't be more thrilled. Thank you for having me.
No fucking problem, innit? Right. I am going to sit on the sofa and drink a brew and think about what Warbands and Rivals decks I'm going to run next. Thank you very much for joining me, Ken Me Wild Nan.
It's all right.
Don't forget, guys, you can check me out at the unrelentingbrush.co.uk to see what I'm all about. We've also got my Facebook, which is facebook.com/the unrelenting brush. Instagram, the_unrelenting_brush. And if you want to really help me out and be an absolute fucking megastar, patreon.com/the unrelenting brush. For £3 a month, that is cheaper than a Saver meal at McDonald's. You get video content tutorials, access to the Hobby Discord, including Hobby Clinic, where I offer any and all advice I can share, and a monthly giveaway to get some cool swag from myself. Until then, thank you very much. Keep kicking ass. Catch you on the flip. Peace!